Hi everyone, thanks for coming. We're here to talk about two films today, Girl with Dragon Tattoo and The Hangover, and we're going to be putting them in the context of gender as well. So I think we'll start with Girl with Dragon Tattoo, if that's okay, and if you just want to take a brief look at our synopsis here.
In The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, journalist Mikhail Blomkvist works for the investigative magazine Millennium with his editor and lover Erica Berger. Lisbeth Salander is an expert hacker and researcher who, because of a troubled past, has been made a ward of the state, with the sadistic Nils Bjurman appointed as her guardian. Blomkvist leaves Stockholm for the small town of Hedestad when he is hired by the wealthy industrialist Henrik Wagner. Wagner wants Blomkvist to investigate the 40-year-old mystery of the disappearance of his favourite niece Harriet, who he believes was murdered. Blomkvist sets to work on the case, searching the family's old records for clues. He hires Salander to use her hacking skills to help the investigation. Trawling through the archives, together they help solve the mystery of Harriet's disappearance and reunite her with her uncle. But in doing so, they uncover some secrets which will have dangerous consequences for them all.
Okay, what do we all think?
I thought it was brilliant.
Yeah.
Loved it, yeah.
Yeah, and just in terms of the Equal Status Act, to contextualise it, what does anyone know the
article or the clause?
yeah, excuse me, yeah.
I suppose it's that the women are entitled to equal status with men, as are transgender people. So those three, women, men and transgender, are mentioned in that article.
So what do we think? Does anyone?
I thought it was brilliant. It was very different, very exciting, and just great to see a female character in such a strong role, because there's so few films out there with strong female lead characters in it.
Totally, I thought so too. Have you seen the Swedish version?
I've seen all of them. I started reading the book and I loved the books, and then I think I saw the Swedish versions of the three films, and then I saw the English version, and I kind of couldn't understand why they remade the film, because the Swedish version was so good, but actually I think they did a really good job.
Yeah, I think
really
so too.
it.
As a female character, and looking at Elizabeth as a strong female character, does anyone think anything, like any observations that came to mind? Well, how is she different from the regular heroine archetype?
She's kind of screwed up. She's had a very difficult upbringing. You don't get to hear too much about it in this film, but I think they mention that she tried to kill her father and tried to burn him. I can't remember the particulars of it, and that she's taken in as a ward of the state, so that she doesn't have parents, and she has to report to somebody, say a civil servant, he has care of her. And she was lucky enough, her first ward was a particularly nice man who had a good relationship with her, and he understood her and saw that she had a positive side. But then he has a stroke, and so she's passed over to a new ward who is a horrible, horrible man. So you can see, even though she's a strong character, she's kind of trapped in a situation, and she has to abide by the laws of the state, and it just creates, obviously, problems for her.
Of course. It's interesting as well, because she's a victim as well as the protagonist,
But she turns the victimhood into kind of victoryhood,
if
you like.
Oh, completely.
I suppose I was very surprised in one way when the guy, there was a sexual innuendo, and he says, okay, if you want to continue getting the money, you're going to have to do a little something for me. And suddenly, it's quite shocking, and suddenly he tells her what to do, and she's engaging in cunnilingus, much to her disgust. That was really shocking, as you said, and horrific. And then, not going to be defeated, she actually goes away and she has a think about it, and she grits her mettle and gets together her resources and gets him back.
Maybe you want to reserve that for
the revenge is pretty sweet for even the viewer as well. It's crazy how gruesome, well, not gruesome and grotesque, a lot of it is off camera, but still it's very satisfying for the viewer in a strange way.
gets her revenge. The other thing that's different about her is just her whole persona. She's not very feminine. She has this whole goth stroke punk stroke biker image, and she does have a motorcycle, and you know, she has spiked hair. I think her hair's in a Mohican or something when we see her first. She's also a computer hacker, which you would usually associate that with a guy, you know. I think she's the first female I've ever seen in that role in any film, so that's kind of satisfying as a woman.
I also like something on a character that, for example, there's that particular scene when she slept with Mikhail, and soon after that she just left, and he couldn't understand, because it's usually associated with men, that they're usually the ones who does that, they do what they do, and then they just left. But in this instance, she is the one who's doing it. So it actually shows a character that she's somebody who doesn't really feel in the mode of the female that we usually associate with in films.
Except that I was slightly disappointed in the end that she fell for him. I'm not sure, I think she fell for him very quickly. You know, within a short space of time she was in the bed with him. And I'm not sure that her character would have done that. I think she, you know, in her context, you know.
Do you disagree then with her sleeping with him or her falling in love with him?
Well, I guess you can't help falling in love with whoever you fall in love with, but it's the biological thing. But I suppose I found it a bit incredible that she would give in to herself so quickly and hop into the bed with him. Yeah. I mean, she was there, wasn't it almost immediately she went into bed
I think
with
she was just using him at the beginning. I don't think there was any emotional attachment whatsoever. She had slept with a woman that she had met in a nightclub. I think she actually had a bit of a relationship with her, and then she sleeps with him. I don't find it incredible that she falls for him, because she's very much on her own, and he, from the outset, is very honest with her and straight with her, and I feel she can trust him, and that's probably, apart from her original ward, it's an unusual it's an unusual thing in her life, because she doesn't really have anybody else.
He always stays her equal, and he makes sure he stays her equal, and I think that's maybe what she was attracted to, because throughout all her life she had these men who were completely dominant over her.
To me, even in that story, in the same film, I disagree with you a little bit, because although she kind of falls in love and try to feel the normal stories of the films that we know, she shows a true character, because if she was another woman, she could have gone to him, scream at him, whatever. But she didn't do that. She just threw the jacket. We know this is an expensive thing, or it's something that was very emotionally connected to her, but she just threw it away, get on a bike, and she drove off. So it shows a strong character as well, that even in the face of that, she can still be strong and move on.
I didn't actually look at it that way at all, Mary, when you were saying about you know, she slept threw herself at him the first time around. Psychologically, I was coming at it from a different angle. Here was somebody who had a horrific background, who I didn't know that story, but in terms of her father, we don't know what happened there. But, you know, somebody who had clearly been sexually abused by this ward, the ward of court or whatever he was, and we don't know what else had happened to her, because she was clearly a misfit. And you know, where I would have gone with that type of a character, the typical nature of that type of character would be you go the other way, as you say, you know, whatever you do to express yourself is being completely different to everybody else in terms of society. And I thought that when whatever the name of the character was, Craig, what's his name?
Mikhail.
Yes, Mikhail, thank you. Daniel Craig's character, wasn't it? But when he appeared at her door in the first place, he came in, he brought breakfast, whatever the case may be, he was kind of taking charge, and she had been with this other woman that she'd met the night before. So but he cleared, you know, more or less told her to get rid of this other woman, kind of took over. And she said something almost immediately about almost a fear of him wanting to have sex with her or wanting to rape her. I can't remember the comment exactly she made.
If you come near me, I'll whatever.
Yeah.
You know,
Whereas
she threatens him.
Whereas that wasn't his intention at all. And where I went with that is when she slept with him, I felt she obviously felt safe with him in that first meeting, that maybe there was something attractive about the safety of him, that maybe it was safe for her now to have sex in a safe way with a man as opposed to the way it hadn't been before, and was safe for her to have sex with a woman. So I went that way with it. I didn't go the other way.
He's a bit of a James Bond kind of a character, I felt, from looking at it, and that's part of that, you know, character. You probably wouldn't like him as much if he was very sensible and
the James Bond part of it as well myself.
And I think he has the motorbike as well, and
Yes.
the leather jackets as well. So there's a lot of that going on.
Yeah.
It's interesting as well because the title of the movie is Girl with Dragon Tattoo, and this is the American title for the book as well. But do you know the Swedish title by any chance of the Men Who Hate Women? Men Who Hate Women. And as well, it takes the focus off the girl. And if you look at it one way, who is the main character? Is it Mikael or is it Elisabeth? Who is the central character? I suppose they're both central characters, but
to me,
I
think it's the girl, Elizabeth, who is the main character.
She's the stronger character.
Probably because she's the stronger one.
I suppose the men hating women theme follows through with the murder
Exactly,
and all of the women that have been killed through this lunatic, psychopathic Martin. Martin was the killer, and he from his own father. Was his father a Nazi? He was, and he carried on the father's killing spree.
And Harriet as a victim.
And Harriet,
as well.
another victim.
Yeah. And as well, the social worker is the man who hates women as well. Yeah. So it ties in great in that way. Yeah, I think. But then again, with the English translation, it's not as catchy a title, so you can see why they maybe changed it.
But I think in the case of Lisbeth, like that ward didn't just pick on anybody. She was a victim, and he could see that in her, and he knew she had nowhere to go, and there was no one looking out for her. I think that feeling of being on your own, whereas. And similar with the serial killer with Martin, there was nobody looking out for those women. So once even that she had Mikael in her corner, you know, when she had her original ward, she was safe. But I suppose it just brings up that whole idea that if you are on your own and you've nobody standing by you, that you're much more vulnerable.
And this kind of question then, do you remember about Henrietta, was it Harriet?
Harriet.
And that, you know, she was put into that group of women who had been murdered, but in fact she hadn't been murdered. And when Mikael is asking Martin about, you know, as he's about to be killed himself and eviscerated or whatever, and he says, "And what about Harriet?" And he says, "What about Harriet?" He said, "You killed her." No, you know. So that was the interesting thing, like you said, it bears out what you're saying, Deirdre, that in fact there would have been a comeback if he'd killed Harriet. You know, but whereas with the other women there was no comeback because nobody followed through on it, maybe.
And it's interesting to hear about like how seen as this object and the woman is this, she's vulnerable and she's not powerful compared to the man. Does anyone know the origin story of kind of how Stieg Larsson, the original author, came up with Girl with Dragon Tattoo?
No idea.
He, I read that when he was young, he witnessed a rape of a young girl that he knew named Elisabeth by a man, and he stood by and did nothing. Although he was not the perpetrator, he stood by and did nothing. And he didn't know what happened to her afterwards. But this was kind of a therapy of writing this book of this strong Elisabeth character that would kind of take action. And in the same way that Mikael is kind of like Stieg Larsson in the way that he ran this magazine. So as well, it's very autobiographical for him.
It's his happy ending.
Yeah, it's closure,
The feminist.
What do they say? All fiction is autobiographical, and all autobiographies are fiction. So case of it. What you were saying about, you know, the power and you know. Lisbeth having the power, that's something in the film that I liked, that I never had to worry about her as a female character. And in other films, you worry about, oh God, is she going to be okay? And who'll save her? Yeah. It was just really nice to have this character that, you know she was going to kick ass.
Well, from one stereotype to the other, we'll move on to our second film, The Hangover. Very different, but if we just want to look at a quick synopsis of that.
The Hangover tells the story of four friends about to embark on a wild bachelor party. Stu is a dentist, Doug the groom-to-be, Phil a teacher, and Alan is the bride's oddball brother. Together they take Doug's father's vintage Mercedes and set out on a road trip to Las Vegas for one last crazy night on the town. The guys are all set for what will be an epic night of partying, and and after a drink and drug-fueled evening, they awake to a trashed hotel room and the mother of all hangovers. As they struggle to piece together the night's events, they realise that Doug the groom-to-be has gone missing and that Stu has lost a tooth and married a stripper. They frantically retrace their steps and eventually relocate the groom just in time to get him home for the wedding. They leave Las Vegas and head home after a weekend that they can't remember but will never forget.
Okay, so as I said, you can't get more difference now in the gender roles there. What do we think?
I have to jump in straight away. Gender roles, my God. First of all, obviously the male versus the female, so traditional, so whatever. The man had said beforehand, the prospective father-in-law at the time, what goes in Vegas stays in Vegas, and all this kind of, all man stuff. And like the women were really the lesser citizens. They were just involved with the flowers and the wedding and that kind of stuff, whereas the men were doing the traditional male. It was just amazing that we still buy that.
It probably ties in with what you were discussing in the previous film. I think that's the King of the Travelers. We talked about women being in the background, and we're seeing in this film as well a totally different film. Women are still in the background, so it ties in with what you say, that if you go and make a movie or a film about the Irish society itself, you're going to find some of those things, they're still there, but if they are put in a certain community or section of a community, we kind of think, oh, it's in that community alone, but all these problems are all over the rest of the society.
It's even interesting in the film, in The Hangover, you'll notice that the bride-to-be, when she's trying to contact her husband, find out where he is, she's not really concerned about his well-being. No. She's concerned about the wedding and whether the wedding will go forward and the appearance of everybody else at the wedding, how they'll perceive. Not one point does she ask, are you okay? Because they had this traumatizing night. But it's interesting, just the idea of, because this film is completely made by men. Yeah. And it's this idea of the man and the way he views the woman as all she cares about is the wedding. Do you think it's accurate, or do you think it's...
I think any more than, every man is like the men portrayed in The Hangover. That's not true. But I think there are men like that, and I think there are women, I hate to say it, but there are women who maybe, I'm going to say hopefully less and less, who their whole lives have dreamed of this, their big day. I worked with a girl and she used to say things like, oh, that's a nice skirt, I like the bottom of that skirt. I'm going to wear a skirt like that when I get married. And I used to say to her, oh, are you getting married? Are you going out with somebody? And she'd say no. And she'd kind of planned, she's saying I'm going to have a barbecue at my wedding. And she wasn't even with, there are those women out there who have dreamed their whole life about this big day, and they don't really care too much about the man. He's just ticking a box. They want the day.
It's the focus on the wedding, not the marriage.
And it's a way of you saying to the world, look who I am. You present this picture of yourself to the world, which is all fake, and it'll all end in tears, and usually does. If I had €1 for every wedding I was at where I went 3 years. But I'm a bit of a cynic, I have to say.
So to get back to just the film and more so not the female stereotypes in it, but the male stereotypes, what do you think there? What stands out?
Very macho lads away on a piss-up, basically, doing all the things that men are supposed to go mad and do on a stag night. I have to say, despite all the stereotypes, I actually really, really enjoyed the film. I thought it was very, very funny. Loved the openings, not the opening scene, but when they actually wake up the day of the hangover and they can't remember anything, and the tiger. It's so bonkers, the whole film, that it's just really, really enjoyable.
Yeah. One thing I found unusual about, not even how the men are looked at and how the women are portrayed, but it's how the men also, it's not just a gender thing, it's it's also, I think the film is racist, and I think it's also homophobic.
It's everything.
And but it's a comedy device. Almost like how women are treated this way. It's a comedy device. It's not like it's glorified. It's just a joke. It's just an inside joke. And even like compared to like the character of Stu, and he has his girlfriend back home, and she's an independent businesswoman and she's powerful, but she's seen as this control freak, and she's horrible, and she's the woman you don't want to have.
Yeah.
While he meets a stripper in Vegas, marries her on the side, and she's really passive and she's really friendly and she does whatever the man wants, and of course she comes across great. And even if you look at like Bradley Cooper's character Phil, I think he is constantly using like homophobic slurs. Well, not too, but like saying things like, "Oh, don't text me because that's gay," and that's a joke. And of course, what he calls the character of Stu as well. And as well, if you look at the only black character besides Mike Tyson is a drug dealer.
Can I ask then, Dave, if we say, okay, it's a comedy, and I mean, if it weren't a comedy, we'd be much more serious about this and we'd be giving out and really focused.
Yeah.
But so can I ask you, do the media in general have a responsibility not to kind of focus on that all? If you look at the reality of women's situation, that 97% of directors of companies are men. We have a glass ceiling and a glass door and a glass floor and every other glass thing that we can't seem to get through. Is there, should we be objecting to the fact that there's a certain acceptance to representing women in that role?
There was a story that I actually read a few days ago in the Daily Mail, UK Daily Mail, which said if a man goes and have an affair, and is a married man goes and have an affair, his marriage or their marriage is likely to survive rather than if a woman does that. Yeah. They said if a woman does that, automatically that marriage is over. So it kind of shows that men were kind of given sometimes an easy pass, say, oh, it's just men, that they let them do that. But if a woman does the same thing, it's a crime, it's unforgivable.
And actually, can I just say, speaking of which, that actually came up in this particular movie too, because Stu, there's an interesting thing about him. As we did say, his partner was a strong character. However, where it crossed lines in terms of, rather than leaving her as a strong character in terms of portraying women in some good light, if you like, she was a perpetrator in terms of domestic violence in that relationship. Yeah. So that kind of almost went under the carpet in terms of, and then, as you say, she had slept with a barman who was a waiter but he was actually a barman on this cruise ship they were talking about. And the other guys kept reminding him of that, going back to your point. Yet they were all on a stag night, and we saw all the photographs at the end in terms of, we don't know what did or what didn't happen, but what goes on in Vegas stays in Vegas or whatever. But there's that part of it, which I think from the stereotypical male-female side of it is an interesting one that kind of goes glossed under the carpet. And also, Mary, when you were asking the question, what could we do to change things in terms of for women? Well, one of them is we could stop degrading women in terms of passing things off as being comedy, whereas in fact it's giving an undertone. And one of those scenes in that, one of the many, was when they went back to meet the guy who had married Stu in this chapel of love or whatever it was, and the way he spoke about his partner, not his partner, the girlfriend or whoever she was, the woman who was working, putting things up there, put nice ass, something like that, more or less like a piece of whatever that we just own, and I'd make a cup of tea for the men and all this type of thing. So it's the same thing again about and it's meant to be kind of funny, the way, like basically these women are good looking. I can get you women if you want women. What kind of woman do you want? All this, like the way I say, I can go and get you a lamp, or I can go and get you whatever. So that goes back to your point.
Women are absolutely vilified in this one. And I'd like to think of myself, I am a feminist, and I think of women as completely equal to me. To me, it doesn't even offend me because I just think it's nonsense. It's a bit like, you actually sometimes see the other side of it now in kids' cartoons, strangely enough. Well, even The Simpsons, like Homer Simpson's an idiot. He is, and we laugh at it. But it's a really bad portrayal of, okay, he loves his children, but he's a bit of a moron. Yeah. Peppa Pig, which you may not be familiar with, is a kids' cartoon, hugely popular, and Daddy Pig is an idiot in it. Like, he's an absolute idiot. And, I don't think that's right either. But anymore that I look at that and think, oh, men are idiots. I don't, But I think they're, at some level, it is wrong. But I think the comedy blanket means they get away with it.
But as well, I think, the idea of comedy is kind of to laugh at our tragedies in life and to find kind of a lighter side to this. But I think in this case, it's more destructive than it is like actually like turning it on its head, turning a tragedy on its head and laughing about it. This is more inciting the tragedy. Yeah.
Did you enjoy it?
I didn't enjoy it. No, but it wouldn't be my type of film. It's it fits into that genre of, I think, these films made by men who don't understand women at all.
Yeah.
Did you see The Bridesmaids?
I did.
Did you like that?
I did enjoy
Because
it.
I didn't like Bridesmaids and I liked The Hangover, so maybe enjoy the opposite stereotype. You know, I liked parts of the Bridesmaid, but parts of it was, they went a step too far. There was some really kind of gruesome scenes in it with bodily functions that I won't go into, but yeah, it wasn't pleasant to watch.
But why was that a step too far for female characters to take? While in something like, say, Girl with Dragon Tattoo and her Elisabeth's character, how is she like, how she's ultra violent and how she fits into maybe these male characteristics that are usually put forward on
Because she's
screen?
powerful in it.
Yeah.
I think that's it. She's
But-
you admire her. You don't admire a lot of the characters in Bridesmaids. They and it's again, it's a comedy. It's taking all of the traits that are the stereotypical traits of, say, women and turning them into a farce.
But even like, say then, this idea of women and men and how women can act like men, and it's seen as this form of feminism, because at the end of the day, feminism is equality. It's not a superiority, like, as we all know. But what about from the standpoint of these male characters in Hangover, and what would it be looked at if they acted more in a feminine way? They're put down for it. So it's interesting to see that, like, do you know, and
It's
that's...
interesting, even on that note, that they're put down by each other, because the guy with the beard, who's the brother of the bride, I can't remember what his name is now, Alan, he came along with a satchel over his over his shoulder, and Bradley Cooper's character said to him, you know, what are you doing with a purse? Is that a purse you're wearing? He said, no, it's not a purse, it's a satchel. You know, Indiana Jones wore one of these, you know, like almost defending it. And the other guy comes back with, well, Jay, somebody or other, also wore one, whatever. So there's a lot of that. So they kind of tore each other, they would have torn each other apart in terms of what you're saying.
It is like this, you have to be masculine. And it's like, and while in Bridesmaids is not an issue, there's no thing with you have to be feminine, or, you know, there is the whole elegance, trying to be elegant, but there's no putting each other down for those reasons.
I think looking at the men in The Hangover, I'd hate to be a man if that was the world I had to inhabit. I'd hate it. I'd hate to be a man anyway. But you know, it's just you have to be a certain way, and it's you know, this is the way society expects you to be, very male and macho, and you know, don't show emotion. Be completely homophobic, but you know, they can't just show their softer side. It's very one-dimensional. So I think it's pathetic, actually.
Yeah. I do think men are as much. Sorry, Tom. You sure? I do think that men are as much victims of the whole thing as women are. And if you're at school and you don't like football, for instance, and you know, if you're sensitive in any way, you actually get the corners knocked off you very mightily fast. You're often bullied and intimidated because you're not joining the macho guys. And then, you know, if a boy cries or a man cries, it's like, oh God, this is amazing, a man crying. It's almost like you're not entitled to have your emotions the way women are. It's very sad.
Compassion is a feminine trait.
Exactly.
So we'll kind of end it on that one there. I'm sure we have lots more to talk about, but we unfortunately ran out of time. So thanks to everyone for coming, and I'll see you next time.